Good afternoon. Welcome to you. So delighted to have you on board with us this afternoon for the 8th edition of the EQ Lunch and Learn, the Power of Empathy. The science behind empathy is very simple. Empathy neutralizes negativity. When you're frustrated, angry, or dissatisfied with a coworker, your ability to temporarily take that person's perspective and see his or her point of view is a powerful tool. It softens your negative emotions, and both you and your colleagues respond more positively, clearing the way for a more equitable solution to the problem. Empathy helps us to remember that the problem is the problem, the person is not the problem. Welcome to the PTS Africa EQ Lunch and Learn series. This is a platform developed to provide professionals with insight into how they can utilize the powerful tool of emotional intelligence as a skill to successfully navigate the challenges and changes that we are faced with in life and at work. The EQ Lunch and Learn series is a monthly chat for professionals who want to get practical insights about emotional intelligence and learn how emotional intelligence can be more important than IQ for career growth. Gain an understanding on how to utilize their emotions as a strategic resource to navigate through challenges faced in the workplace, and to receive tools to build the emotional muscle that's necessary to thrive in these uncertain and unpredictable times. I am not here alone. I have with me today two amazing guests. Let me introduce each one to you. I am going to start with Christine. Christine Orono is a seasoned and self-driven HR practitioner with over 27 years of extensive and broad HR experience, mainly from a major international bank and in private consulting. Recently part of the transition program as a people change lead, driving the people and culture change agenda as Barclays Bank of Kenya transitioned to Absa Bank Kenya. One of Christine's passions in people is people development through coaching, as she enjoys connecting deeply with people, their needs, and helping them to identify the right opportunities to excel at what they do. Christine, you're so welcome. If you guys want to connect with Christine, you can find her on LinkedIn. Christine, say hi to everyone.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Mucha. Thank you so much for that. Wow, that introduction. I was wondering that. Thank you so much for inviting me to this program and looking forward to the engagement.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I know it shall be a very rich conversation with you on board. My second guest is Katleho, and I am really happy to have him on with us today. He is a leadership development facilitator, a coach, and a speaker with a passion for youth development and unlocking human potential. He has over 7 years experience in student leadership development, corporate education, organizational development, coaching, and training. He is a firebrand, if I may call him that, and truly committed to the work that he does. For you to connect with him further, we're going to share in the chat a link to his LinkedIn profile so you can engage with him. And we're going to learn a lot more from him today. So these are the guests that I have today. Katlea, say hi to us, please.
Hi, everybody. So excited to be here. Yeah, we've been talking, Mucha, and you've had a number of my friends, whether Yuka Beth or, Robert, or, most recently, Gita. But yeah, I'm glad we finally made it happen, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. So am I. I'm really looking forward. I can see we have people who are already tuned in. You're very welcome. Wildest Dreams, I see you're excited for this session. Carolyn, we're happy to have you here. She says, looking forward. Edith is here as well, and she says, looking forward. If you are with us online in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on YouTube, please share your thoughts with us. Feel free to engage with us and interact with us. We will be very happy to get your comments and to get your questions. We will come to an official Q&A section, but feel free to add your questions even as we go along. We are as easy as that. So looking forward to our conversation today. We're talking about the power of empathy. So guys, I want us to dive right in to our first question. There are many definitions for empathy out there. Katleho, let me start with you. What is empathy to you?
Thanks, Mucha. Let me actually start off because, when I have this conversation, by acknowledging that empathy is very hard. It's like a really, really hard thing to do, and we'll get more into it. But in terms of a definition that works for me is really thinking about empathy as a competence in being able to see the world from other people's perspectives. So it's an ability to not just see the world from your lens, right? So I've got a set of glasses that I see the world through, but building the competence, right, to borrowing your fancy glasses, Mucha, right, and sometimes wearing them to see the world from your perspective. So really, that for me is what empathy is essentially about.
Fantastic. I like that. Seeing things through someone else's glasses. And yes, mine are quite fancy. Thank you for noting. Christine, what is empathy to you?
Hi, thanks, Mucha, for the question. Empathy to me is about, similarly to what Katleho has mentioned, when you talk about connecting with the, situations of others, whether it's their feelings, their perspectives, I see empathy as that. Thankfully for me, empathy happens to be one of my top strengths. Some years ago, I did a Strengths Finder assessment, and empathy arose as my third highest strength. And so for me, it comes very easily because I'm really able to instinctively feel what other people are feeling, even what is unspoken. It's the quality of being able to deeply connect with other people, what they're feeling, and help you to respond appropriately. When we talk about leading others or managing others, I'm in the field of HR. You really need to be able to connect deeply with people's situations, be able to appropriately respond or manage them differently. So that's what I see, is being able to see through the lens of others, like Katleho has said, seeing how others see, putting yourself in their shoes. I think that's a definition that's very popular. How does the shoe fit that person, and being able to understand them from that perspective. So briefly, that's what I think empathy is all about.
I love that. I love your definition, and it's great that, especially considering your role, this is something that comes naturally for you. And I'm going to jump ahead a little. I was going to ask this question a little later, but I feel you've given me a really great segue into this question. So for you, empathy is something that comes naturally. It may be interesting to our viewers to note, considering the fact that I'm an emotional intelligence coach, that actually empathy is my area of weakness. So that is not something that comes naturally to me. I am not naturally empathetic. As a matter of fact, my area of development is I often miss on emotional cues. So considering that, Christine, what advice or what help is there for someone who is unlike you, someone where empathy doesn't actually come naturally? What are your thoughts?
Wow, that's interesting. It's a loaded one. There are various techniques I think the person, people who are struggling with empathy would need to kind of try and use. Naturally, empathy goes together with listening. So for me, I find it important if you're the person kind of person who struggles with empathy, to sort of slow yourself down and listen, and not just listen surface level, because many of us listen to respond, but listen deeply to when you're interacting with somebody, is slow yourself down, listen to words, but also listen deeper, even into the tone, into the feelings that the person is trying to express to you as they're talking to you. Many times people don't express everything they are feeling through words. So you've got to be able to pick it out from that conversation. And it's not easy. I think anything can be practiced. Like we say, you can actually build muscle, isn't it? Physically, you can actually build muscle. So with any of these things that, any skill, if you take time intentionally to build a skill, you can actually mature in it. It'll be much harder than somebody who naturally or instinctively has this, but you can put some effort and begin to pick up the skill. So like I've said, start by learning to listen. Slow yourself from responding quickly. Listen to somebody. Many times in the workplace, we're very busy, of course. I mean, it's like a whirlwind. We always have many things to do. And when you're interacting with people, you sort of sometimes find yourself like a bit in a rush. So for somebody to practice empathy, I would ask you to slow yourself down, really gives the person time to express themselves. So learn to listen for me. The other thing I actually say is, start taking an interest in other people's, characteristics. Learn about their personalities, learn about their values, their priorities, who they are. Learn to be interested in your colleagues' situation in life. Just listen to that. Many times we focus our attention on our interactions just on work, but with empathy, it requires you to extend, your understanding of a person beyond the work that they're doing for you, the task that they're performing for you. It's kind of get a fuller perspective of what a person is going through. It's not about being intrusive, but really progressively learning to learn the people you work with, what makes them tick, what motivates them, who are they about, what are they about? If you learn to always take an interest in that, slowly you begin to build this muscle. The other thing I think, and you might be able to touch on that even more later, Mucha, is there are tools out there nowadays. There are tools to help you assess. First, assess yourself, learn yourself before you're able to learn other people. There are tools out there about personality, values, strengths, and all these things. The more you learn to master yourself, then you also begin to take an interest on learning, the next person, whether it's a family member or a colleague at work. When we try and start doing these things, then you begin to find that muscle of empathy begins to grow. Let me stop there before I into
Wow,
instruction.
I feel as though we could even stop the session now, right, Kando? And
Yeah.
everyone will feel like they came away with some.
We've taken it all. We've taken it all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Kando,
it's a lunch and learn.
For sure, it's a lunch and learn. Before I chime in with my thoughts, Katlego, what do you think? Just really speaking to the point I raised, that for me, empathy isn't something that comes naturally. So, what would you add for those like me where empathy is not a strength? How do we, like what Christine said, she likened it to a muscle. How do we build that muscle?
Yeah. And look, Mucha, I felt so much solace when you said you also are weak on empathy. Because when Christine was like, she's strong on empathy, I was like, whoa, man, because I'm in that crew, in that crew of people like struggling with empathy. But going back to where I started, right, about acknowledging that, for some of us, right, and maybe not all of us, but that empathy is difficult, but also it's worth it, right? So it's a difficult skill to build, but it's a worthy skill to build, because if you think of it, right, like, it's one of those, and Stephen Covey speaks about this whole concept of, in human interactions, you can either, he speaks about the emotional bank account, right, where we either are like depositing into people's emotional bank accounts or withdrawing from people's bank accounts. And I find that empathy is one of those competencies or skills that is not just a deposit, but it's a high compound or high interest compounding yielding kind of deposit, because it's the kind of thing that once you get it right, and once you actually practice empathy and connect on an empathetic level, it unlocks so much more, right? It's a catalyst for so much richer relationship and connection, right? So I think starting it there is very important. And then secondly, again, to what Christine is saying, and I love the construct of it being a muscle that we can develop, because really it's really thinking about it as that it is something we can all continuously work on, but because also as we work on it, it makes it really unlocks so much, right? Unlocks so much in our homes, unlocks so much in our offices, unlocks so much in our relationships. And so yeah, I have to agree that it is important, can be done, but also is really so significant in terms of relational investment in other people.
Wow. There's
can I add something?
Yes, please do.
No, it just occurred to me that empathy is just, how can you just be human in any situation? So it's really, at the core of it is, what is a human thing to do in any situation? And that's really where, empathy stems from. It's our human. How can we feel the next human being? What should we do in that situation? Yeah, it just
I love it. I love it. It's amazing how God puts together our panel, and somehow there is the energy that comes, and I'm loving the conversation we're having between us. Just quickly, thank you so much to all those who are with us. I think I called out or shouted out a few names, those I see, those who are regular attendees of this Lunch and Learn series, and to those of you who are with us for the first time. So Edith, you're welcome. Robert, Alice is a regular. Great to have you. Pauline, Elizabeth. Hey, Elizabeth, it's great to have you online. I can see that a conversation you could not miss. Yes, I suspect some of it has to do with the fact that Christine is online, but
of course.
You're welcome, Elizabeth. It's great to have you on.
My greatest supporter, Elizabeth.
Yes, Caroline, Mark, great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. As I've said, feel free to share your comments. We will have a dedicated Q&A section. However, if you want to share your questions, even as we go along, you are welcome to do so. Loving the conversations. I really, really love what you said, Katleho, that empathy is a difficult skill to build, but it is worth it. And I like the way you put it, that it is a high interest yielding skill. So the return on investment is higher. The effort you have to put in yields a higher investment. And to your earlier point, Christine, I always say that self-awareness for me is an EQ superpower. If I hadn't started on the journey of understanding myself better, I wouldn't know that empathy doesn't come naturally for me. I wouldn't know that there are times where I'm missing out on cues from my colleagues, from my team, from my customers. And not knowing that is putting me or puts me in a really bad space. I want to, come back to you, Christine, and ask, empathy is often perceived as a weakness. So we're talking about this idea that it's a high yielding, skill. What would you say to someone who says, no, if I'm empathetic, people will walk all over me? What are your thoughts?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Any business is about people. Yeah. And, by nature, people have, I think the most complex resource in any business to manage is people. And when you're talking about people, I mean, there's too many variables impacting the motivation and the performance of people. And so for me, I see empathy as a very critical skill that enables any manager, leader, or even any employee who is working with others to produce results. You cannot underestimate the role that empathy plays in enabling teams to deliver performance, because people by nature are emotional. They're going through stuff. They have the situations are impacting them in the home. I mean, coming closer to a post-COVID world where things have radically changed, and the need for all of us to really empathize with the situations that people are going through. I mean, many people are facing very different situations back in their homes and even in the workplace. We've got, in more recent days, there are a lot of people who are ill, or people who have lost loved ones. So the situation from 2020 has emerged to a point where without empathy, no business today can go on without really stopping to think about how their people are doing. You can't continue business as usual anymore. So empathy is not a weakness. Empathy has become a critical part of the skill sets of emotional intelligence, where for us to be able to get the best out of people, for us to be able to get motivation out of people, we've got to be more empathetic with our teams. Given the scenario that we're faced with COVID, last year people had to take pay cuts or no pay, and employers who could not engage with their colleagues in an empathetic way definitely would not have sailed through this situation. So I see empathy as a critical skill even of building leadership credibility, because the more closer you get into the issues that your people are facing, the more credibility you earn with those people. Yeah. Because if I stop to think, what is Mucha going through and how can I support Mucha through this time, and be able to maintain a high motivation from Mucha's performance, the more I can do that, the more I win credibility with people, and the more I can unlock more performance. By nature, people are emotional. I'm telling you. We underestimate this whole aspect of emotions, and I'm so thankful to Mucha, who's the emotions evangelist nowadays, because emotions play a big part in the way people show up at work. We can't, long ago when I started working, we used to be told by our managers, leave your home at the door. I don't know if you used to hear that kind of statement.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
the issues you face, leave them at the door as you're walking in. I don't think that can happen anymore. You can't leave those things at the door as you're walking into the workplace. They come in. You come in with the situation back home. You come in with your sick aunt. You come in with with all that. That our human, the entire human package comes in with you at work. So for me, empathy is a critical skill for us to build. So well said by Katleho. We need to be able to get closer to the people that we lead in order for us to unlock motivation. The discretionary effort that most businesses are lacking today is because we lack that ability to really empathize with people's situation. They may not want you to give them a solution to their problem, but that genuine and sincere understanding of what they are facing can unlock a huge amount of, loyalty in a business. Let me stop there before I give a thesis.
You're speaking my language, and indeed, in my journey, exploring this topic of emotional intelligence, it has become clearer and clearer to me that people are driven by their emotions, even for that individual who believes they are highly rational. When you actually peel back the layers, you realize that actually they're not. Emotions drive behavior. This is a scientific fact. And you've talked about something, Christine, that I think is really powerful. You've talked about the idea of tapping into our people's discretionary efforts. And I think for me, this is where the work I do becomes extremely exciting. Based on the Gallup studies engagement, and they have been studying engagement for very many years. And they say that in many organizations, less than 30% of the team are actually fully engaged. Less than 30%. I mean, that's a really small number, which means that of the 70%, we're losing out on their discretionary effort. That is where people go over and above what is required of them to give to the organization. Kaklego, I want to come to you. And when I look at your CV, which is pretty impressive, and I look at your leadership journey, you have achieved so much in the last decade as a founding member of the African Leadership University, ALU, and as a co-founder of Nia Delta, a leadership and education consulting firm, over and above, what we have on your bio as your, day-to-day role. Would you say that for you, empathy has been an asset in your leadership journey? And why would you say that?
For sure. Thanks, Mucha. And thank you, Christine. I'm just loving this conversation. Such great insights and nuggets already coming into this conversation. And yeah, look, thank you. My journey has been one where I'm very lucky to have had the kind of journey I've had, but also it's come with a lot of testing situations. And yeah, when I think about how important empathy has been on my journey, I look back just in founding and building, or being part of the founding team and building ALU. The African Leadership University is an institution that brings together some of the most talented young individuals to this, experience where they are, prepared to lead and transform the continent and the world. But what was always fascinating to see, and one of the most powerful encounters I had at ALU was just appreciating the different cultures, right? So you could imagine on just one campus you had the West Africans and the Nigerians who are always loud, right, and the South Africans who are always doing their own thing, and you had the North Africans who were their own thing, and then there was the East Africans, and so you were constantly dealing with this mesh of cultures and different ways of engaging the world. And for me, it was such a powerful experience to go through that. But then seeing how important empathy was, again, and often we think about empathy as feeling it's all about the sad emotions, right? It's you only use empathy when it's someone just lost their mother, or someone just failed a test, right? But empathy is action every single day, right? It's really being able to understand where Nigerians are coming from when they are so flamboyant and so loud, right? But it's also appreciating where the Kenyans are coming from when they approach the world in the way they do, right? And that really is the competency of empathy, is really being able to hold what I call a disposition of constant curiosity, right? And I think it speaks to what Christine was speaking about, is that empathy is just going into the world with a constant, wow, that's fascinating, that's interesting, tell me more, I'd like to understand that better, right? And then that's kind of what, for me, ALU allowed me to tap into that constant fascination, but also then when you start to, because a lot of my work over time has also, pushed me to travel to different countries and different parts of the world. And again, when you then land in Nigeria for the first time, you can't help but appreciate, right? Man, Lagos, right? So much color, so much, and that gives you that depth of understanding and appreciation of where people are coming from. But I mean, I guess all that to say, when I think about my journey over time, I then realized that what empathy has allowed me to do is it has allowed me to genuinely and deeply connect with people, right? And you mentioned that, for instance, right now, the work I do is I've founded and lead an organization called Nia Delta. And Nia Delta, really, our purpose as an organization is to help leaders and organizations make purposeful shifts. So Nia is the Swahili word for, purpose, and Delta is, the Greek term for shift or change. So Nia Delta, we really exist to help organizations make purposeful shifts, right? But with that, what we've learned and what I've learned in my leadership journey is that you can never help people or organizations change unless you've connected, right? So connection comes before change. And so often as leaders, and I mean, I'm a leadership developer, right? So my whole job and my even life purpose, my mission statement is unlock potential and help people become the best versions of themselves. But for me to help them do that, I realized that I cannot do the shift. I cannot do the change. I cannot do the transformation. I cannot do the leadership development without doing the genuine connection. And what I've come to learn and appreciate again about the assets of leadership, and I love that you use that word. I mean, the assets of empathy, and I love that you use the word asset. Is that again? It's kind of the whole thing about really connecting with people. And you'll realize every person, whether it's like, I had to deal with like 18, 19-year-olds who are complaining about food and the taste of food and not having enough salt or not having enough spices, all the way to when you have to deal with like executives and CEOs. You really come to a realization that all people need is to feel heard and understood. And once you can prove to people that they are heard and they are understood, it shifts, right? So even in our consulting business, one of the things we do as our superpower is we spend a lot of time before we go into intervention, right? Because as consultants, we love interventions. But before we even go into intervention, we spend a lot of time in diagnostic and discovery. And it's so powerful when you come back to a client and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm hearing from your organization. And they're like that mirror effect plays such a pivotal role, because then that starts the relationship. Then that's when they feel like they can trust you. They can let go to allow you to enable them to make that shift, right? And I find that often as leaders, as consultants, as leadership developers, we miss that step. We rush too quickly to intervene, to change, to enable, to unlock, without doing the empathizing, which is right, and like thinking around the phases of design thinking. Is like that empathy is so critical in really building trust, in building connection, in building that forging those relationships. So yeah, in terms of it being an asset, again, you were saying, Mucha, self-awareness has been your superpower. I think for me, just learning to empathize has been my business superpower, right? Like it's done so much for the work I do as a consultant. Just that makes such a difference in the quality of relationships.
Wow, what a rich conversation we're having. I love something you said. You said the disposition of constant curiosity. Hey, talk about laying down some English. Disposition of constant curiosity. And it's so true, right? And it speaks to what you said earlier, Christine, that if I want to develop greater empathy, I must be curious. I must be curious about others and move away, Christine, you said, from listening for the sake of listening, or listening so I can prepare what I want to say next, but to deeply listen, to have that curiosity, wanting to know more about others. I want to go to some questions that we have because they're very much aligned to the conversation we're having. Before I do that, Edith is here with us. She says she's glad to be here. Christine is her mentor. Edith Gicheha. So Edith, you're very welcome being with us here. Robert is asking a question, and Robert was one of our panelists in an earlier edition of the Lunch and Learn. How do we avoid people walking over us because of our empathetic approach? So going back to the earlier conversation we had, where I asked Christine, okay, there are those who say empathy is a weakness, and we've already established that we believe it is a power. Katleo says it is a superpower for him. So here's a question from Robert, and either of you can take it, or both of you. How do we then avoid people walking over us because of our empathetic approach?
Okay, I can give it a...
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think, okay, when we say be empathetic, I really love the way Katleho has brought it out around, connection and building trust, because those are critical ingredients in any form of performance that we have to deliver as organizations or as individuals. And so for me, when we talk about empathy, it doesn't mean that you become, a mat that people can walk over you. If anything, I think the empathy then gives you license to demand for performance. So it doesn't take away the fact that you have deliverables. If you're managing people, there are deliverables to be done. It's only that the empathy gives you the how to engage better and get better results from people. So for me, you still need to contract with people around what they need to deliver, whether it's performance objectives, tasks that they need to do. Those still need to be clear. But the empathy then gives you the how to, and how to do it in a humane way, while still keeping people accountable for the delivery. And so it's I mean, I give this as an example many times, that I've had to, I mean, in the role that I play right now, I've had to, have tough and difficult performance conversations with people, while still remaining empathetic to their situation, but still holding them to account to deliver for what they need to do to deliver. And in the same, we'll have, there are many people processes we have to deliver on, including even firing people who don't end up delivering what is expected. But you still have walked through a journey where you demonstrate, fairness, humanity, the process, that even by the time you're getting to that eventual separation, even the person will acknowledge that you've done all that was humanely possible for you, in the situation at hand. So empathy doesn't give us license not to demand performance. It actually heightens it, if anything, because you've given the person all the support required to deliver. Then they need to be answerable why they're not doing it. Okay, so let me just stop there, and maybe Katleho can add.
Yes,
Yeah,
and now as you jump in, there's another question that's very much aligned, and perhaps you've already started answering it. And this is a question from Vanessa Southern Lord. How do you balance between being empathetic while managing poor performance? So, Christine, you've talked about this a little, but as you answer, you can answer the two questions together, Katleo.
Awesome. No, thank you, Mucha. And hi, Robert. Always good to see Robert. Is a very good friend of mine from my good days in Nairobi. So good to see you, Robert. Yeah, and such a powerful question, right? Because yes, and I think just to segue from where Christine left off around that exactly, I think when we move our thinking as well about, empathy being because I think, again, naturally, right, when we think empathy, we're like, oh, no, right? We immediately go into that, oh, kind of thing. But like, if you actually think of it not as a, oh, but like a curiosity, right? And really standing up on that power of curiosity, and also what curiosity can unlock as well, right? Because a lot of my work is really around the power of questions and the power of stories, right? And all our lives, we live in the paradigm of the questions. I believe all organizations are driven by the questions they ask, and all lives are defined by the stories they tell, right? And when you think about that, you realize that, again, what the empathy does is it really unlocks the curiosity element, right? Or the question element. But now, like, again, putting together then, Vanessa's questions with where Christine left in responding to Robert's question, I think a useful framework that I learned through a book, which I might have on my shelf, by Kim Scott. Kim Scott wrote a really great book. Kim Scott, she did a lot of great work at Google, and she developed this framework called radical candor. And what radical candor does is it argues that, as leaders, we often sit on a continuum in terms of, working with people between what she calls high candor, which is like, I'll just tell you as it is, you suck, you are pathetic, you are ugly, you can imagine all the words bad managers use, to the extreme of the other extreme, which is high care, right? Which is then managers who will never fire someone, will never give bad performance review, will be like, oh, no, you're right. It's not, she speaks about those people saying, it's not you, it's me kind of thing, right? When it comes to performance issues, right? But then she develops an alternative framework, which she calls radical candor, which merges what she calls, high care and high candor, right? So if you think of this as like this block, there's managers who sit on like a low care and low candor, which is like, they don't give you feedback, but they don't even care about you. They forget you even exist, right? And then there's managers who sit on the high candor, low care. And these are the people who just tell it as it is. You suck, you're pathetic, kind of thing. And then there's the high care, low candor managers those are the leaders who are, again, just care too much to actually be effective. But the sweet spots, which she argues for, is that space of high care and high candor, but then also that you have to care to give candor, right? So it's like approaching. So going back to what Christine was saying, I've had to fire a lot of people, but I've been able to say to them, hey, I'm firing you because this is not the job for you. And I love you enough, and I believe so much in your potential that I'd prefer for you to be doing something else, right? Like I prefer, and I'm going to support you in finding that something else because this space is not for you, right? And I think that's where it is, right? It's being able to, again, start from a place of empathy, but it's genuine empathy, which is like, I care about your well-being. I care about your performance. I care about your growth. That's why I am telling you that this is pathetic work. Right. So I'm not leading with it being pathetic work, but I'm saying, look, be honest, to being honest, like you are above this. Right. And this is why I can give you this because I care enough. Right. And someone else who doesn't care about you will let the slide, but I care enough to not let that slide. Right. And so that's kind of, and I hope, I don't know, Vanessa and Rob, that helps with that paradigm. Because again, if you take it from the position of power. Sorry. Yeah.
No, sorry. I thought I'd lost you for a second. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that Robert and Vanessa, we have answered your question. I love the idea of this intersection of high candor and high care. So I care enough about you to be honest, and I'm not going to be honest, in a way that demoralizes you. But at the same time, I'm holding you to a high standard because of the high expectations that I have. This idea of tough love. Yes, I really, really love that. And the book that he refers to, Katlego refers to, is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I think that is a book that is well worth reading. Continuing with our conversation, and please continue to share your comments, your questions, and we will keep dipping into the questions that you have. We started talking about this a little, this idea of the power of empathy. But I want to kind of flip it, Katlego, and ask, what is the danger of being low in empathy as a leader, especially during this season of COVID when we are battling heightened uncertainty and increased volatility?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question, but and it really is. If there were a time in the history of our lifetime, at least, that empathy is much more important, and why this conversation is so important, it is now, right? Like, there's never been a time where empathy is more important, because to be honest, right, like, just globally, everyone is just, us millennials call it going through the most, just people are seeing flames, in every area of their life, right? And it's hard, it's a difficult time. And so even if there were time for empathy, it definitely is now. And I think the analogy I often think of, just the nature of like emotional being is that, all of us walk around the world carrying like a bucket of our being, right, of emotion, right? And right now the whole universe is, like, most people are at the brim of their bucket, right? Exactly, like, I'm up to here, right? And in that context, right, like, as we move out around the market of life, we need to then be careful, because then just a slight action can tip over someone, right? And then we're dealing with then the risk of then low empathy means now you've got water spilt on you, they are upset because they've spilled and their bucket has fallen over, and it just becomes a messy market. And the problem with bringing it to work, right, is that now you spilled, they've spilled, you are wet, they've spilled, and everyone else is now disoriented, and now they are also spilling, and it has that kind of, because now they are upset, and then that then reacts this way to that person, and it just becomes like and so for us, especially as leaders, it becomes more important. Often I think of, leadership as atmosphere management, right? Like, your biggest job as a leader is to create an atmosphere that allows people, you're like a gardener, right? And you choose the best plants to put in your garden, and yours is to just ensure cultivation and nourishment to ensure that the plants grow and do their best, right? And so with that, I think as leaders, it even becomes more important in this time that we create ecosystems or environments that, given the how much people are carrying in their buckets, doesn't tip it over, at least allows them to actually put it down and be able to process it, or to say, hey, look, you know what, you can give me some of your water today, right? And really, there's simple ways, as Christine was mentioning earlier on, like simple ways, like, one thing we do in our organization is we have this question that we often say, how are you doing? and how are you really doing? So you have to answer both those questions, not just how are you doing, but how are you really doing? And you'll be surprised how powerful just, that, and Christine, you mentioned it, slowing down, because most of the time in organizations, right, like, especially these Zoom calls, right, we just want to immediately get into the agenda, right? So even the how are you, it's like just to get it over and done with. But like if you pause and really ask people, how are you really doing? It unlocks so much, right? So with that, I mean, the last thing I'll say is that I think as we think of it as leaders, we need to then think about how to create that environment. And sorry, I feel like I'm referencing a lot of stuff, but is it David Rock just came to my mind. David Rock has this really great framework for social interaction. He's framed out called the SCARF model. And a scarf is in like a scarf. So it's SCARF. Check it out. But in the SCARF model, the premise of the SCARF model is he argues that as humans, we react socially and social cognitively the same way we react physiologically in terms of threats and rewards, right? So we've all heard a lot about flight and fight, right? So like in physical spaces where there is threat, we either fight or flight. Now he argues that in social spaces, there's also that kind of construct where there are things that create a toward state, so that when we have an environment that is nourishing, that's caring, we move towards those spaces. And when we have places that create threats, we move away, right? And then he breaks it down into like these 5 areas that we focus on, but I won't bore you with that. I think that the key message I want to bring out here, based on also Mucha, what you said earlier on about that 30% of engagement, is that one of the things that managers also need to do is bring people in, right? And what most managers, because of a lack of empathy, do is they create an away state where people then are just showing up, as you're saying, rightfully so. People show up because how most people express the state of away is not like they don't run away, but they check out, right? And a lot of us have organizations of checked out people because we've got managers who are not empathetic. But my argument is that empathy creates a space that draws people in. And you as a manager, if you can create an environment, even in your team, right, where I know when I have my team meeting, it's just the one place in my week where I get to breathe, right, and be, right? And like really, I'm kind of a big proponent now of saying team meetings should be breathing spaces. I know it's a crazy idea and most managers might kill me for this, but really, like, managers should start thinking of their teams as not places to run through agendas and action items, but just be the place where people get to come home and breathe with others. And you can do it with simple techniques, like simply just taking 30 minutes in your team's time to just say, let's just check in, right? And ask people genuinely, how are your kids? Because for the first time, their kids are right next to them. They are irritating them. They are annoying them. They are there, right? And so really, it's that work-life balance doesn't exist anymore. So let's stop pretending it does. And really just like, again, and I loved, Christine, sorry, this is the last thing I'm going to say now, but Christine's mention of that, like, it's humane, like empathy is humane. And you're right. And here in South Africa, we speak about Ubuntu, right? And the essence of Ubuntu is being human. And right. And you will hear in South Africa about unobuntu lomuntu, which means like this person has an essential characteristic of being with people, which is concerned about their fundamental being. And what the power of Ubuntu is that when I am concerned about your fundamental being, right, that's where we say umuntu, ungumuntu, ngabantu, because it's like a person is a person because of other people. And smart people then realize that they cannot be at their best when others around them are not at their best. And this is why empathy then is not a weakness, but a strength and a power and a superpower even. Yeah.
I love that. I really like the point you made about the idea that leaders create either a space where people are drawn to or a space where people are kind of repelled. And, I like this quotation. There's a quotation I often share by Peter Drucker that says, your foremost job as a leader is to take care of your own emotional energy and then help orchestrate the energy of those around you. Oftentimes, as leaders, we don't actually realize that our emotional energy is depleted, and that is now impacting the actual team around us. And so it's very hard to be empathetic to others if you're not empathetic to self. And this is something that I have learned in my EQ journey, that empathy, isn't just for others. As a matter of fact, if you have zero empathy for self, it is highly unlikely that you will have empathy for others. And as a leader, you need to create or cultivate an environment that draws people in so that they do, as Christine mentioned earlier, give of their discretionary effort, which is really what is the game changer for organizations. And what's interesting to me about skills like empathy, which is really at the core of emotional intelligence, is that it is a soft skill that actually drives bottom line results. They are tangible benefits. If you look at the work done by Gallup in looking at the impact of having 30% of your team engaged versus having 70% of your team engaged, I mean, that's big. That's a big difference, right? That's a very big difference. Thank you so much for the comments. Edith says, wow, a whole 30 minutes to check in. I think that's definitely a radical concept, right?
It is. But again, if you think of it as investment with a compound effect, right? That's a thing about it, right? Like it, again, it's like investment. If I say to you, give me $100,000 right now, right? And you're like, oh, that's a lot of money, right? But if I say you invested and it has higher yield, it's a different dialogue. So I get, and the thing with Edith is I can speak to it, right? Like I found that when you've been able to unlock your team that way, it has exponential impact on our performance later on.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is the point you've made. We often ask, how are you doing? But we're not really asking. You've been in those meetings, right? Where it's like, morning, how's everyone doing? But it's like, I'm quickly moving. I'm quickly moving to the next point. I'm not really interested in how people are doing. Christine, what do you think about that?
Yeah, when you were mentioning that, I was just remembering a situation that I faced some years ago where one fairly senior colleague resigned. And in my exit interview with this individual, I asked them why they're resigning. You would be amazed at what they told me. It goes back to what you're saying about the greetings. He told me that in the whole time he was working for this team where he was working, his managers never even asked him how he's doing. Never greeted him. Greetings, genuine greetings. And because he was very high on relationship building as a domain for him, it was not working for him. So all these things we're speaking about actually impact retention of people in organizations. Yeah, because I think you've had the quote that says people don't resign or leave bad organizations, they leave bad managers. And it boils down to basically the relationship and the environment. I liked what Katleho was the environment that the leader has set, especially if it's one where people are not free to be themselves, where people are not free to don't feel the genuine and sincere support and concern from their manager, then it becomes a very toxic environment for many people. Yeah, we all want to be valued and appreciated as humans to begin with, even before our delivery. So sometimes some managers take these human resources a bit too far, and only using the people as a machine for delivering results, but they fail to understand that there's a need for connection. One of the human needs that every human being has is that need for connection. I think we talk about 6 human needs. One of them is connection. Yeah. And if that connection fails to be made, for some people, that environment becomes too toxic for them to work in. Yeah. So every one of us is driven by different motivators, but there are a big group of people who are driven by that connection. Like the gentleman who resigned because his manager is not caring, doesn't ask him anything about how he's doing. Yeah. So I really commend, Katleho and the check-in. Last week, our team had a check-in. It went into 2 hours, not even 30 minutes. And you know what it really did was, because we hadn't met for a bit of time, and each and everyone was given an opportunity to pour out where they're at with their work, with their family, and with the wider world. It was awesome, and you know, we got to learn so much about what people were facing, and you know, got us to connect at an even deeper level. And you see, it's those personal connections that actually build an organizational culture. Culture is built on relationship, yeah? And relationship building is cannot happen without proper connection and rapport being made by leaders deliberately so that this team can unlock its full potential. People hold back because they are not sure whether their managers really care. That's the reality. Yeah. That you know, so like today I was coaching one manager. He was having an issue with you know, one of his team members, and I told him, you need to ask this person, you know, questions that will deepen your relationship with them. And because I know the other side of what this person is facing, I told this manager to go and ask this person, what is your biggest fear, so that would open up about what concerns they're having, because he tended to find that this person is a bit closed. And I know some of the issues without telling him. I just said, go and, you know, uncover these issues by asking the right questions. So for me, you know, cultures cannot be good, organizational cultures cannot be built without authenticity and empathy from leaders. That for me is critical in today's world, especially with the current generation that you know, we call them the millennials, the Gen Zs, or whoever. They do not want to work for a cold organization. They want to work for an organization that cares genuinely, not paying lip service to it. Yeah. And so it's become imperative for organizations to then develop their leaders to the point where they can really, really be authentic and really connect deeply with the people that they lead. Let me stop there.
I love this conversation that we are having, and thank you so much for the comments you're sharing and for your questions. I really feel that this is such a rich conversation about an extremely important topic. I have a question here from Caroline, and please do keep sharing your questions. I have a question from Caroline I want to go to, but I just want to echo what has been said by Katlego and you know, Christine, around the idea of check-ins as an organization. Remember, I talked about the fact that empathy isn't a strength for me. This is an area of development for me personally. I am the kind of individual who misses out on emotional cues. I'm very much focused on the solution. So when someone, and I'll give you a good example, when my son falls, rather than rushing to say sorry, I'm thinking, okay, can we put a plaster? So, you know, that's how I'm wired naturally. But one of the things that has been powerful for me is slowing down to check in. And it's something that I actually have to intentionally practice, slowing down to check in. And one of the activities that we introduced as a firm and is what we call the roses and thorns kind of, you know, what have been the highlights this week for you, right? And what have been the lowlights? And then because I am a problem solver by default, my question to my team is, are you sharing to be heard or are you sharing for help? Because my default nature is to jump in and say, well, if this is the problem, I think you should do this. And I think that's my default nature. So my question is, are you sharing to be heard or are you sharing for help? And that has made a big difference for us. And for me, especially because this is not stuff that comes naturally. So Caroline's question, my boss cares too much to make any tough decisions. An amazing guy, but how can I assist him as his HR? I think this is a really great question. How do I help? Because this person is just too nice. So they are high caring, right, Katleho? From that model.
Exactly. High care, low tender. And
Yes.
and to be honest, that at least my immediate response is, you know, really, honestly, the best gift you can get him is that Radical Candor book by Kim Scott. And I know I'm also not I'm against that, like solving problems by just giving people things. But I mean, there is something so powerful about like how Kim Scott is able to just synthesize that. And often, right, it comes from that place of understanding where your like the boss comes from. And most of us come from a place of we never want to hurt people. So this is me. This is my situation. I will, go around issues but because for me it's like I just never want to hurt people, right? And that I'm assuming that's the thing, right? But what's really important though about what shifted in my mind about in Radical Candor was also the realization that if you play the long-term goal, that's long-term. So in the short term, you might not hurt people, but by not being honest with them in the short term, you hurt them even more in the long term. And I think once you understand that, it shifts the approach, drastically. So yeah, I think that's kind of my thing. And also, just as a side note, I think Mucha, you and I need to just join like one, what do they call these things? A support group, because I like while you were talking, I'm like, that's so me, right? And maybe just amongst friends, I'll also just share that, recently I had a one-on-one with a friend of mine who literally said to me, Kat, like, you're the greatest guy I've ever met, but your problem is you often move too quickly to solution. And sometimes I'm just here and I just need a friend. I don't need a coach. I don't need an advisor, right? Because, she, and literally this is the word, you have a TED Talk, a book, and a framework for every problem, right? Right. And that's me, right? Like even with my like younger siblings are like, oh yeah, you should read that book. You should watch that. You should do that. And I guess, and I love what you said though, that framework of being able to then ask people, are you sharing this with me to be heard or to get help, right? Because when you get that wisdom, then how to sit with it. Because sometimes that's all people need you to just sit with them in processing it, right? And then that's where I think about, Brené Brown speaks about how, the difference between sympathy and empathy. And like sympathy is just like feeling for, and then there's like empathy, which is connecting with. But I think you and I, which actually land in that third bucket, which is problem oriented. So it's not like we're not empathetic, but I think sometimes also we move too quickly to solutioning without just like, when someone is in tears, sit there and like cry with them, right? Sorry, this is the last thing I'll say. I heard a brilliant story some years ago about, sorry, I mean, we're talking with friends here, right?
It's fine, yes. But I heard a fantastic conversation with friends.
Yeah, and I heard this really, really good story the other day of like, there was a competition in this like community in this town for like the best human, so like the human of the year in the town, right? And so the winner that year was like a 7-year-old kid, and like his parents got the newspaper and they were like, let's give him a name, Tim, right? Tim, how did you win this competition? Like, and it's like, and they say you won it because you helped Mr. James, which was our next door neighbor, through a difficult time in his life. And he was surprised. Tim was like, what? How? Like, what did I do? And they're like, well, apparently you really were supportive to him. And he's like, oh, but I didn't, that wasn't much. Essentially, I was playing with my toys on the one side of the fence and heard Mr. James crying on the other side because he had lost his wife. And I just jumped over, sat next to Mr. James, and I cried with him. And they're like, that's what made him the human of the year, because he understood, right, that sometimes the most important thing that people need is not, mucha like us, like a plaster or a solution. It's just like, because I'm crying, come sit next to me and just cry with me, right? And I think that also is just like the other powerful side of empathy. And that like there are times where it's not a solution, it's not a PowerPoint presentation, it's not a consultation, it's just like a cryathon. Let's cry together kind of thing. So, yeah.
I like that, a cryathon. And that for me has been a powerful lesson I have learned in developing this muscle called empathy, because it is my default is, okay, let me get a plaster, or okay, get back up. Life is about, you should hear the rah kind of conversations I have with my sons, who are 12 and 8. And at that moment, I think they just feel like, mommy, I just fell. Just give me a hug. You know what I mean? And I imagine that it's the same thing for those that we're working with. Wow, this is such a fantastic conversation. Can you imagine we have we're about 20 minutes to go. So, Katlego, a common misconception is that, we are, how can I put this? That we're doomed. And we've been talking about this quite a bit, but I want us to really bring the thoughts together, and I want us to have very clear action. So here I'm tapping into your strength, the one where you give, frameworks. So I'm tapping your strength. I have a millennial who is on this call, who is tuned in and listening in, who is saying, where do I even get started? How do I become more empathetic? And I know earlier, Christine, you talked about listening, and Katlego, you talked about being curious. So I want to bring back the conversation as we start winding up to those practical tips, all right? And perhaps some of what you say is going to repeat what we've said earlier, but that's okay. We learn by repetition as humans. Those of us who are in the learning space will tell you that when we hear things, several times, it helps us to really synthesize them. So I want us to come and just really help that individual who's thinking, okay, wow, I've heard so many things. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by everything that has been said, by this idea of a disposition of constant curiosity. Can you tell me in plain English, what three things can I do?
Yeah.
What three things can I do that will help me to be more empathetic?
Yeah, and thank you. Now I feel like I'm a fish back in water. Here are the three things. No, but like the first thing is something you mentioned, Mucha, self-compassion, right? And as leaders and as individuals, especially during such time as COVID, really making time. And like us as millennials, again, we speak a lot about self-care. I think self-care is a loose term. I think there's something deeper here around like ensuring that you create time for rejuvenation. And the thing about rejuvenation, I must say, is that you often don't know you need it until it's too late, right? And what I often say to leaders is what you need to do is you shouldn't rejuvenate when you feel like you need it, but to put a rhythm of consistent rejuvenation, right? And so, for instance, I'm a quote-unquote Sabbath observer, right? And that's my rhythm of rejuvenation, right? Whether I feel like it or not, whether I feel like I need more work, I just have to stop to rejuvenate. So I think that's at least one key concept around like really investing in time for replenishing you as the most important resource that your team and people around you need, right? So that's first. I think the second one is and often, as you know, I taught leadership at ALU, and one thing I often used to say to my students that the best way to learn some of these skills is through observation and application. And what I mean by observation and application is getting good. Often like when we do case studies of African leaders, I often say to my student, whenever you see a leader doing something wrong or being messy, we all move into, African leaders, they are bad, corrupt, whatever. But I often say to my students, no, you need to, as leaders of the future, immediately say, if I were that leader, what would I have done? How would I have done differently? And I use the observation things because there's so many opportunities, even in movies. I think my favorite ways to actually learn empathy is to watch movies and then in the movie, imagine how I would have experienced whatever the movie is, right? And then so I observe and then I apply by saying, how could I have done that differently, right? So I think that's a second tool where, like, again, it's one in as Christine was saying, that muscle building is really taking that time to observe. And there's so many case studies for observation in the world around us, that you can take and say, okay, so-and-so did this. This is how their reaction, this is what happened. How would I, given their circumstance? And, even it builds empathy, right? Because when you move, even with our leaders, right? When you move from, our leaders are corrupt and you really start to dig deep, you're like, oh, these guys have it hard, hey? Like there's so many systemic realities that they have to work through in making some of these decisions, right? And I think the third one, as a practical tool for what to do that I've applied to my life is, and this goes back to where we started, Mucha, where we was talking about how the problem with most of us and why we struggle with empathy is because my whole life is viewed through the single lens, right? So my whole life is viewed through the single lens. And the best way to develop empathy is to regularly say, hey, Mucha, could I wear your glasses for a bit just to take on those glasses and say, whoa, Mucha sees the world in an interesting way, right? And the more you do that, it builds, it almost think of it as it expands your empathy capacity, right? Because now you've been able to, sit and one of the practical ways that I do it, and it was introduced through, again, another book by John C. Maxwell, which is titled Good Leaders Ask Good Questions. And in there, he's got this concept that he introduces called learning lunches, where he encourages leaders that every month, set aside a budget for a lunch where you're going to take someone out for lunch that you wouldn't typically speak to, right? So think about, and this could be like literally anyone, like the woman selling mandazi on the street, a clown at a circus, but like really try to push your boundaries in terms of like people you wouldn't typically spend time with, and then just have lunch with them. And I've, started this practice for a number of reasons personally. And it's always amazing, right? Even when you sit with like a CEO or like, I had one with like the very senior leader at like McKinsey, right? And when you actually start to connect with people as humans, even there, I was like, what? Right? Like even this person who's like got it all sorted, to really connect with them as a human can be so mind shifting, right? So yeah, I'd say those are my three, I guess, takeaways, right? Right. One being self-compassion, two being observation and application, and then three being, this shifting your lens regularly through making time to, be in spaces that you don't usually, because again, the world we live in is so reinforcing of our views. Think of Facebook. All your Facebook friends are friends that look and feel and seem and do and think the way you do. And take time to push yourself outside of your boundaries. And that really enables empathy.
I like that. I like that illustration. And one of the ways I've found that it works for me, even beyond connecting with people that I wouldn't normally interact with, is traveling. I've found that the more I've traveled across the world, the more I've interacted with different cultures and experienced, how people just see things differently. I feel that it broadens your mind. It opens you up to not just imagining that your way is actually the only way. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Christine, before I ask you to share, and especially as someone who is in the kind of HR, L&D change space, before you share your 3 points, I want to just sidestep a little. I want to sidestep a little before we come to your 3 points. There is this perception that women are more empathetic. Now, obviously, I've told you that I don't fit into that that mold naturally, right? It's something I'm working on. But I want to come to first this idea of self-empathy. And the reason why is this. We recently conducted a research project, a Women in Leadership project, and I'm really excited. We'll be publishing the results soon. But at a glance, when I was looking at the data, we sampled women who are either at C-level in multinational organizations, and we had some criteria as to what would classify as a multinational, or a woman who was running a business, and we had criteria. So the business had to be generating over 20 million in revenue year on year over the last 3 years at least, and with at least 10 employees. And then we also looked at women who sit on boards, and we asked that it be women who are chairing the board or chairing a committee of the board. So these are high-flying women. And at a glance, when I was looking at the data, what we can see is that these women are very high in effectiveness, but very low as far as, empathy to self, or as far as, I think it came up in the data as health, very low in the outcome. We measure a number of outcomes, right? And we found very high in effectiveness, but very low in this space of health and well-being. Do you think that has something to do with empathy for self and self-compassion?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I tend to feel that probably women prioritize other people before themselves, whether it's children, even in the workplace, you find there's some women I talk to, they're so concerned about everybody else except themselves. So they give of themselves. Women are very giving, so they'll give a lot of their time, give a listening ear to their colleague, but deny themselves the time, like what Katleho has just shared around self-compassion, taking care of self first. I actually had the same problem myself for a long time, where it for me, I can be a very sacrificing person, and I think many women are very sacrificing, and then you find it happens to the detriment of your own self. So you find that you've done everything for everybody else, but you found you have no time maybe to for self-learning, or for for your own well-being, whether it's taking yourself for exercise, taking time to bask in the sun. I was talking to somebody today about basking in the sun, just the basic wellness basics that COVID has taught us to go back to, that we never used to regard too much before. So you just find that at the workplace the woman is so busy serving everybody else, come back home again serving everybody else except themselves, and find themselves without time to actually pour into themselves, in terms of you can't give what you don't have, basically.
Yes.
So I think most of the women need to, especially women who are in high flying roles, actually find this even more difficult to do, because by the time you're getting back home now, your parenting comes in, your wifing responsibilities come in, and you completely put yourself in the back burner completely, and it could take years for some people to realize that. So I actually agree with the findings of some of that study. And I think I've seen a lot of initiatives out there right now trying to help women understand that putting yourself first is not selfish. I think it's important. Care, self-care is very important if you're going to be effective, even in your role as a leader, as a woman.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I found it very interesting. Like I said, I looked at the data at a glance. We've not actually, developed the research paper that's going to be written by 6 seconds as a result of that study. But at a glance, I noticed that, and that really caught my attention. Wow, time has really, really flown by. We are coming to the end. So, Christine, I'd like you to share your three takeaways. As you do, let me just read this statement by Caroline. She says that my 4-year-old daughter says that when someone is making my hair, she will hold my hand so that I don't feel pain. Oh, wow. I guess she will make a great empathetic leader. I didn't teach her that. Yes, so holding someone's hand can help them to not feel pain. Thank you very much for sharing that, Caroline. Christine, what would you say for someone who is saying, wow, you guys have said so much. What are your three takeaways?
Wow. There have been very many takeaways in my mind. I think let's practice humanness. I think that always remains something even when I'm coaching my fellow leaders in the bank, I normally say to them, look, if you just thought as a basic human being, what would you do in this situation? Without all our management theories clouding your mind, because there's all that theory we've read and studied about how to motivate people and all that stuff. And sometimes I think if we just went to the basics, I mean, I like what Carol has just shared. Carol is known to me. Even a child knows how to, can empathize. It's a human universal skill. We can train ourselves to. Of course, some do better than others, like we've said. So for me, it's practice, pause. Active listening is very important for me. I really liked the model that Katleho was sharing with us around candor versus care. I think it needs to be taught in management schools if it's not being done already, because we do find when people come into the workplace, they're either of each. You find people either or, yeah? But for someone to be able to combine the two very well, how can I, practice care for my people while still holding them accountable for the work that they do. Some people find it's difficult to balance the two, whilst it should not be actually. So for me, my takeaways is, hey guys, I mean, in the world that we live in today, empathy is core to a lot of what we are doing, to any management process. Empathy, whether you're instituting a disciplinary process, performance process, a talent management process, it's got to be one which is connected with the individuals that we are discussing. So it's not a good to have, it's a must have in today's world. We have seen that emotional intelligence has become an even greater skill today. I see it appearing more in job descriptions than I used to see in the past. So it's one that will help your effectiveness as a leader, but most importantly, deliver outstanding performance within a workplace. Because the only way to unlock the human heart, you've got to win the hearts and minds of people. It's not about the head, just the head, the heart as well. How do you unlock the heart? Because in it is where everything resides. Energy, passion for the job, whatever you call it, yeah? It's in the heart. It's nowhere else. And the only way to a person's heart, they used to say that the only way to a man's heart, I don't know if Katlehouse agrees, food, but I mean, every human being will respond to love. Every human being. And I'm using love here as a generic term for that sense of connection, really. And so I'm urging all of us to practice. All these things we talk about takes practice. Look for a coach. I think Katleo was mentioning. I mean, find a support group. Talk to other people. Speak to a HR professional who you think knows this stuff. Let them coach you through. In my role in the organization, I coach managers every day. I mean, yesterday I was talking to a manager who has to deliver a tough decision. I had to coach them. So how will you actually say this? What words will you use? Because the choice of vocabulary is also important. So we're not born knowing these things. Let's take the time to learn. And I love the lunch and learn concept, Mucha. It's awesome. Keep going at it. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow. What an amazing conversation it has been. Thank you so much to all of you who have tuned in with us. I love that last comment you made, or at least I've kind of put it together or summarize it this way, that empathy helps us to unlock a person's heart. And, I think we as leaders and in our organizations need to understand that gone are the days where people endure work. Gone are those days. People no longer endure work. People want to work in an environment where they can thrive. And the only way that you can do that is when you connect with them. So thank you so much, Katleko. Thank you so much, Christine, for your insights. Before I let you go, your parting shot. Christine, your parting shot before I let you go. And then Katleko, your parting shot before I let you go. But thank you so much for honoring our request to be part of this. The Lunch and Learn series is something I am truly passionate about. I have a vision that organizations across Africa will stop on the last Wednesday of every month at 12:30 East Africa time and encourage the members of their teams to tune in to the Lunch and Learn so that they can, develop these skills that are so essential and often not taught. So your parting shot, Christine and Katleo.
I thought I'd given it, but I think I'll just go back to it. Let's use empathy to win the hearts and minds of our people, either in your family, in your workplace, in the society at large. I think the world will be a better place. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. Yeah, I think for me, it all comes down to love, right? I think when you put it all down, it's really loving people, and really like empathy is one of the greatest skills in love. And again, even leading is love, and you need to love people enough to lead them. And when you do that and do it effectively, that's how transformation, impact, and change really come about.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you. This has been a delightful conversation and our audience agrees. Edith says, I love this so rich conversation. We can feel how genuine and authentic you all are. Rira says, fantastic discussions and very informative. Assets of empathy, so well delivered. Joseph, the takeaways from this session are awesome. I would actually consider empathy as a strong personal brand. I love that. Yes, thank you very much. Vanessa, Southern and Lord. Vanessa, it's so great to have you tuning in from the other side of the world. Great discussion, really eye-opening. Thank you for taking the time. So thank you. Asante Sana, it's been a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for making the time. So bye to you both, and thank you very much. Well, there you have it. We have come to the end of our conversation, and what a powerful conversation it was. There are so many insights. My mind is actually still kind of going around and around as I think of the amazing things that have been said. We talked about the idea that empathy really begins with listening, not at a surface level, but deeply to the words, the tone, and the feeling. I think for me, that is the first takeaway that I am definitely going away with, that we must spend more time listening. The second takeaway for me is, the idea that empathy is a high-yielding skill with great rewards. And so as much as it is hard to practice empathy, as Kahleho said, the reward is far greater. Whatever you put in to develop this skill of empathy, you will get back 100-fold. And then lastly, I really like the idea that empathy gives you the license to demand for better performance. Empathy is a superpower in leadership that helps you connect with people. And as you connect with them, you're able to demand greater from your team. I absolutely love this conversation that we have had. And as we wind up the conversation, let me just encourage you to continue in your emotional intelligence journey. As you have tuned in with us, diarize the last Wednesday of every month, 12:30 East Africa time. We will be having conversations that will help you to build this muscle called emotional intelligence. I always love to say something a friend shared with me, that emotional intelligence isn't just another skill that you need to add to the plate. Emotional intelligence is the plate upon which all other skills actually sit. Emotional intelligence is the foundation that enables you to thrive as a leader as you develop all these different skills. I'd like to invite you to a program that we are running next month called the Unlock Potential with EQ. And I'm going to share in the chat a link to our site. You can have a look at this program. Are you someone who feels that you would like to build greater self-awareness? Get to a place where you understand yourself, just like I learned to do. Understand what your areas of strength are and understand what your areas of development are. Are you someone who feels that you want to go beyond just knowing yourself, but to understand strategies that you can then utilize with the insight and information that you have gained? Are you someone who feels that you want to do better at the relationships that you have with your colleagues so that you can increase your ability to collaborate? Are you someone who feels you want to be more effective at work? If you've answered yes, then I invite you to take a look at our Unlock Potential with EQ program. It was designed to help you build your emotional competence and take ownership of your emotions. We are helping professionals like you to decode the data of emotions and utilize them successfully so that they can be more impactful at work and achieve the results that they want. I love to support you too, so that you can leverage the power of emotional intelligence to create the future that you want and power up your career to achieve your goals. Check it out. I really believe that this program can help you. It is run over 3 sessions, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 2 hours each, and we will dig deeper, go beneath the surface to understand how emotional intelligence actually is more important than IQ for your success at work. So check it out, www.pts.co.ke/UPEQ. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. A big thank you to my guest, Christine Orono of Absa Bank and Katlego Mohono of very many hats, but a leadership consultant who's really passionate about developing young people. Thank you so much to both of them for the amazing insights that they have shared today. I look forward to continuing to connect with you. Please connect with us on social media. We are passionate about empowering Africa and African professionals to leverage the power of emotional intelligence. And so we're constantly sharing insights and tips and tools that you can utilize. And for those of you interested in joining the training, just connect, check out our website, find the information, and shoot any questions that you have to us. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I leave you with this video that just really highlights our upcoming training and the insights or the benefit that it will be for you. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a fabulous afternoon. Harvard Business Review has hailed emotional intelligence as a groundbreaking, paradigm-shattering idea, one of the most influential business ideas of the decade. Hi, my name is Mucha Mulingo. I am an emotional intelligence coach. Decades of research show that individuals who are high in emotional intelligence are more effective, have better relationships, are able to maintain those relationships, and they also are able to have greater balance and quality of life. I am excited to announce the 4th edition of our Unlock Potential with EQ webinar series, running from Tuesday the 4th to Thursday the 6th of May from 5 to 7 p.m. East Africa time. Do you want to learn how to stop operating on autopilot and build greater self-awareness to increase impact and effectiveness at work? Do you want to develop the skill to be able to utilize your emotions as a strategic resource to power up your career and achieve the goals that you have set for yourself at work? Do you want to build interpersonal relationships and strengthen your ability to play well in the sandpit and build mutually beneficial relationships? If you have answered yes to these 3 questions, then join me online for the Unlock Potential with EQ webinar series. This series is for anyone who is interested in strengthening their ability to increase effectiveness, to communicate effectively, and successfully navigate the human factor at work. The Unlock Potential with EQ webinar series is developed to help you to leverage the power of emotional intelligence to power up your career. Join me from Tuesday the 4th to Thursday the 6th of May from 5 to 7 p.m. East Africa time for an investment of 5,200 Kenya shillings inclusive of VAT. For more information, visit our website www.pts.co.ke/UPEQ. That's www.pts.co.ke/UPEQ. And I look forward to seeing you online and to supporting your journey to develop emotional competence.